When Fu Nanhua walked out of the house, he found that the handsome maid was sitting on a small bench in the yard with a handful of corn in her hand and was feeding the chickens. After seeing her, Fu Nanhua smiled slightly. The girl didn't know if she was shy or was indifferent by nature. After Fu Nanhua opened the courtyard door, he found that Kai Jinjin was waiting in the alley. He was not in high spirits. He turned around and closed the door. Through the narrowing crack of the door, he saw a face looking up. Fu Nanhua suddenly found the maid, a poor girl who should be full of earthy smells, actually has a pair of quite good eyes, which makes her look like a tender green blooming in early spring. However, Fu Nanhua didn't think much about it. The woman with outstanding beauty, fat and thin, with graceful appearance, was really tired of seeing the young master of the old Dragon City. Walking side by side with Kai Jinjiang, Fu Nanhua asked, "What's the matter? It's not going well. Chance is a matter of good luck, and it may not be able to make a final decision every time. So don't be discouraged. Kai Jinjian is naturally charming and charming. After practicing, she washes her marrow and cuts her bones. As far as her body is concerned, she is of course as pure as a glass of glass compared to ordinary women. A woman at the foot of the mountain is shocked to be a god at first sight. That's it." At this time, the face of the fairy in Yunxia Mountain is not very good. It can be seen how bad her mood is. Otherwise, it will not be so obvious on her face. She should have been waiting in the alley to hold back her anger. She is really unhappy. One of the masters, one of the local snakes in Shujian Lake, Liu Jimao, the true monarch of Zhejiang. There was no room for negotiation. When we met, he moved out of my master, the head of Yunxia Mountain, to press a junior of me. From beginning to end, after only a few words, I drove him out of that Gukan's yard. Fu Nanhua was thoughtful and reminded, "Let's talk after getting out of Mud Bottle Alley." Kai Jinjin wondered, "Isn't all magic prohibited here?" Fu Nanhua said with a smile, "Who can come here to find opportunities? Who doesn't have the ability to press the box? Young people like you and me may be fine. According to the rules of the town, the higher the level of cultivation, the stronger the suppression will be. Great! Under the sage. The closer the realm is to the sage, the more frail and childish it is. Right? But have you ever thought that if there is a master who has attained the Tao and is damaged in his way, he will also use his supernatural power? Could it be that it is really not as good as us underachievers?" Kai Jinjin retorted. "With a sage here, he dares to openly attack me." Fu Nanhua persuaded, "We are here to find a good relationship, not to have a grudge. Even if we don't worry about our lives and have a bad relationship with our seniors, it will not be beautiful in the end." Kai Jinjin is not someone who is on the cusp of bullshit. She nodded and said, "What Brother Fu said is very true." She grimaced and looked pitiful. "But I'm really not reconciled. I have given you 10 Yungen stones. If the bamboo basket is empty, how will I explain it to my ancestors when I go back?" After walking out of the clay bottle alley, Fu Nanhua and Tai Jinjian were refreshed almost at the same time. It was not as simple as the light suddenly brightened. The two looked at each other, and then their eyes quickly shifted. Fu Nanhua, who was originally very excited, was also calmer. He carefully considered this trip to the alley, and the alliance with Kai Jinjin did not reveal any clues, and the transaction with the young Song Jixin was flawless. In a fair transaction that conforms to the rules, how can the saint who sits and watches the wind come and go, and the water rises and falls, would have the leisure to intervene? So where does this pressure come from? Could it be that true monarch Zhejiang, who has never even heard of his name? Compared with Fu Nanhua's far-reaching thoughts, Kai Jinjian's thoughts were simpler, thinking that it was because Fu Nanhua said that true monarch Zhejiang had indeed used some kind of supernatural power to monitor himself. She was frightened for a while, but fortunately, she only said some complaining words and never said harsh words. The two people, each with their own thoughts, walked on the street. The farther they were from Mud Bottle Alley, the lighter the dull feeling in their hearts. Fu Nanhua felt that it was a matter of chance, while Kai Jinjian felt that it was a heavy burden on the family. Looking up at the archway in the distance, Fu Nanhua asked curiously, "Zhejiang Zhenjin of Shujian Lake. Why do I have no impression at all? Even though my old dragon city is located in the extreme south of a continent, the position of the real emperor is so glorious. No matter how ignorant I am, I should know something." Kai Jinjin lowered his voice and said with a sneer, "What kind of true monarch? He is only a real person in the front position in the side door. He is the most sanctimonious, and he is not qualified to be called a true monarch at all. It's just a flattery from a good-for-nothing shrewd. Naturally, he would not confer on this person the title of true monarch. One radish and one hole. And if one is given the title of true monarch, it may mean that he will not be able to get it back for 200 years. There are only 2 places left for true monarchs, and we won't casually give them to a non-disciplined cultivator who seeks fame." Fu Nanhua was stunned. So it is. Every true monarch sits in the dynasty and can gather, suppress, and increase the national fortune for the monarch. The position of the true monarch of Taoism is almost a member of the Taoist sect. At the peak of the temples of the secular dynasty, the upper pillars of the military family, and the great scholars of Confucianism are also listed here. Kai Jinjin asked casually, "How about Songji's salary?" Fu Nanhua also replied casually, "That young man is ambitious, born intelligent, and has a lot of backing. Just the pattern." Kai Jinjin smiled and said, "Not big." Fu Nanhua laughed and said, "I can't say it's not big. It's just not big enough." The two walked under the archway. Fu Nanhua was in high spirits and murmured, "The world is always the same. Kai Jinjian looked up at the words, "Don't ask outside." Her heart was empty. She just felt lost, as if the epiphany she had obtained in Mud Bottle Alley was returned to this town. This made her extremely irritable. Song Jiksen's mansion belongs to a large family in the Mud Bottle Alley. In addition to the lobby where the plaque is hung, there are also left and right rooms. The plaque in the lobby is Huayun Hall, and there is no signature. Song Jiksen always feels that just looking at the handwriting, it is not a handwriting by everyone. The two masters and servants are staying in Song Jiksen's main house at the moment. The teenager is rummaging through boxes and cabinets. The maid is standing at the door. She softly asks, "Master, haven't the business been negotiated yet?" Song Jiksen put down a bunch of bells and sat back on the only chair in the house, holding the back of his head in his hands, and crossed Erlong's legs. That old Longcheng Funan Hua. Not all idiots. Didn't take me as an ignorant thing from the beginning. It's really fun to want to get along with me. Later, when he was tricked by me, he showed a fox's tail, thinking that he was tricking and using some thunder tactics. He would be able to use both kindness and power to fool the young master, compared with the unpredictable Mr. T. I am 108,000 miles away. The maid Jigui said, 108,000 miles. Son, your statement is too exaggerated. Song Jiksen made a face and said, "That's 10 Mud Bottle Alleys." The young man threw a bag to his maid. "Look, this is the copper coin mentioned in the secret letter." The man next door, surnamed Chen, also got a bag. I guessed at the time that he had this great fortune. It's not necessarily a good thing to hit the head. Sure enough, wouldn't it annoy the two couples? I think next, the person surnamed Chen still has to suffer. By the way, Jigui, let me tell you, come to our house guy, who claims to be the young city lord of the old dragon city. Listen to his tone, and then look at it as a pie. At least it is not an embroidered pillow. And this jade pendant. What is the old dragon cloth rain? It must be valuable. Song Jiksen patted the green and lovely jade pendant, which had already been hung on his waist. In the heart of the young man, he felt that he was a big step closer to being a scholar like Mr. Qi. Jigui opened the exquisitely embroidered bag and asked softly, "Young master, can you earn more copper money and come back?" Song Jiksen smiled and asked, "Do you like it?" Jigui twisted a golden copper coin with 2 fingers, shook it, and said with a happy smile, "Jin dangling. How festive it looks." Song Jiksen laughed dumbly. "That's okay. Okay, since you like it, I'll bring back a few more bags. The money is on the outside. The money is the winning money on the beam. The spring money on the peach talisman. And the belly of the Buddha statue. The support money in the house or in the hand. But the common people have the attention of the common people. And the Shan family has the saying of the Xian family." She narrowed her eyes with a smile, like 2 crescent moons, and asked, "Chen Pingin's bag." Song Jiksen frowned. The maid noticed her son's strange mood, carefully put away the copper coin, fastened the bag, and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong?" Song Jiksen pouted, covered his neck with both hands, twisted it, and said lightly, "It's okay. I remember some rubbish things. On the Chen side. Don't worry, so as not to cause trouble. It's Zhao Yao's nerd, most of the time. He will be easy to deceive if he will get the copper coins, so I will keep a bag for you." Sir, seeing that the maid was a little strange, Song Jiksen did not continue to explain. Seeing that his son was not interested in speaking, the girl did not break the casserole and asked to the end. Jigui walked out of the house and came to the courtyard, and saw the 4-legged snake, which was an eyesore, lying half dead on the ground, basking in the sun, and often rolling around, looking very enjoyable. A fiery girl walked quickly, stepped on the head of the 4-legged snake, and twisted her toes. The poor little fellow groaned. BSP. She raised her foot, and the 4-legged snake swished away, galloping all over the yard, hitting the wall repeatedly. This natural yellow 4-legged snake from home, the golden carp that gluttonously strayed into the fish basket, the black loach kept in the water tank by Gukan, metal, wood, water, fire, earth. Out of 5, looking at the 4-legged snake with horns on its head, the girl grinned with contempt. Stupid thing. In the courtyard of the child Gukan's house, the old man and the woman were still sitting opposite each other. The former stretched out his palm and watched the spread of the lines on the palm. The old man put away his hands, raised his head, and asked, "Goshi, how many women like you are married to men from other places in the town?" The woman shook her head and said, "There shouldn't be many. Anyway, I'm the only one on the side of Xinghua Alley and Niping Alley." The old man hesitated for a moment, but still leaked some secrets to her. Girls 6 and 12 years old, boys 9 and 6 years old are 2 big thresholds respectively. The former need to cross by themselves, while the latter can push through with external force. 1. There is one more thing after that. You can be more sure. The richer the family, the more advantages you have. Opening the door, entering the hall, entering the house. 3 things. The first 2 steps really can only be determined by chance, especially the first step. Success or failure just depends on whether God rewards the food or not. The woman's eyes were full of smiles, to be seen by Xianchang. My family Guchan is the one who can take the first step on her own. The old man smiled, but said, "As long as you are a child who grew up in a small town, it means that the aptitude is not outstanding. Although your Gukan is not 9 years old, it is no exception." The woman's face instantly became extremely ugly. The old man raised his foot, stomped the ground, and said with a smile, "Don't worry. The quality of the root bone is of course important, but it is not the first one. God is pleasing to the eye. Even a dog on the side of the road and a weed can be slowly cultivated. The road will eventually reach the sky and reach the clouds. This small town makes an exception to allow so many outsiders to enter. No matter what the cost of fishing, it will also decline and decay, and there will always be a day of complete barrenness. The geomantic heritage of this place finally ushered in the last big year. Whenever a person is about to die, the light will return, and the spirit at that time will be restored. It has become especially majestic, and your family, Gutan, has benefited from this. The woman's lips trembled, trying her best to suppress her surprise. Her watery eyes also showed a seductive charm. The old man glanced at her and said with a smile, "Of course, don't be greedy. The person who has this great opportunity is definitely not only your son. To put it in an ugly way, the huge East treasure Pingzhou is qualified to monopolize this luck. Humans, even if they exist, must not have been born yet." The woman held her hands to her heart and murmured, "Enough, enough." The old man thought of the younger woman in Yunxia Mountain and said sarcastically, "I'm busy and exhausted, and I only know to ask for some external things. I really picked sesame seeds and lost watermelons. It's stupid." Then the old man smiled and said, "That's right. The old people in Yunxia Mountain have never had a big vision. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given the old man this opportunity, owning an almost inexhaustible treasure mountain. Then this financial resource is rolling in and prospering, and it has been reduced to the point where it needs to rely on a disciple to support the scene." Inside the house, the child who had been punching and kicking at the door for a long time stood on a stool, lying on the window, begging with a sullen face, "Mother, let me go out. Please, I promise you will be obedient." The woman glanced at the old fairy, who nodded. Then she went to open the door, took the child's hand and walked into the yard together, and said softly with a stern face, "Little Can, don't make trouble. Do you know, Mother has never hit you. If you dare to be disobedient, Mother will really hit you again." The child snorted, drooping his head, and was very sick. Gutan brought a small bench and sat down on his own. Showing a three-legged situation with his mother and the old man, the child raised his cheeks with both hands. "Mother, what did you just say to Mr. Storyteller? I can't hear you clearly in the room. Can you talk about it again?" The old man snorted, and after thinking for a while, he shook his wrist, and the big white bowl reappeared in his palm. He lowered his head and looked intently. His eyes were dark and unclear, only to see ripples on the water surface of the white bowl, and occasional splashes of water. A black line swam around the white bowl quickly, hitting the bowl wall from time to time. In order to accept this apprentice, in the mud bottle alley, the old man tried his best to break down his practice for decades, and only managed to move his hands and feet 3 times. Once was to let the woman step on the shit. The last time is to convince him that he is enlightened by secret techniques if it is outside the small town. Of course, this is absolutely impossible. He is a veritable Taoist true monarch, and I am afraid that he would not dare to do such a thing. But above the small town, Kaijinjin is no different from ordinary people. Take the opportunity. The second time was the most ingenious, and even the old man himself thought it was a stroke of genius. It was a kind reminder that the woman mistakenly thought that the youth with straw sandals was a cunning revenge. At that time, the old man let the young man speak out, slowed down a little, and just happened to let the woman capture this detail, not to be outdone. On the way of cultivation, there are people in the same way. Good fate and evil fate. Between the lines, at this time, the woman in the courtyard, Mrs. Gu, was worried, for fear that the old immortal would say some bad news. The old man twitched the corners of his mouth, and in the corner of his eyes, a child crept up to his feet, and then ran to the courtyard door. The woman screamed. The old man held the white bowl in his hand, and stood up in a hurry. "Apprentice, for the sake of the teacher, let me show you what the greatness of heaven and earth means, so that you don't know the importance and ruin the great cause of you and me." The woman's eyes went black and she fainted on the ground. The old man waved his sleeve suddenly. The next moment, the child who was about to hit the door latch stumbled and fell to the ground. But when he realized something was wrong, he looked around blankly, and finally raised his head and looked at the storyteller standing beside him. "Where is this?" After the old man put his hands together, he said calmly, "In the bowl." The child became more and more at a loss, and suddenly heard the old man yell, "Get up!" The child instinctively stood up, motionless. Gusan found that she seemed to be standing on the edge of a cliff, and in the distance in front of her, there was a sea of clouds surging. Then, the child's eyes widened in astonishment, and in the vast expanse of whiteness, a huge torso broke through the clouds and moved slowly. But it is simply too big to reveal its full true face. The child was so frightened that he was about to take a step back, but the old man quickly pressed his head with his palm and said sternly, "If you step back now, you will be unable to move an inch on the road of cultivation in the future. Stand firm for me." Gukan was so frightened that tears flowed out of his eyes. This stubborn child who has never been lawless didn't even dare to cry. The child was completely unable to restrain his body. His legs trembled and his lips trembled. The sea of clouds in the distance boiled. The misty white clouds seemed to be gradually fading, so there was more black in the sky. Extremely long and huge, just like that little loach raised in my own water tank, after it had grown soaringly. Such an idea popped into the child's mind for no reason. At that moment, Gusan couldn't help but take a step forward, stretched out her slender arm, facing the sky. A head as huge as a mountain slowly swam from the sea of clouds. The child's eyes were bright, and he was not afraid at all. He even beckoned and shouted, "Come on, Come on, it turns out that you have grown so big. No wonder I always feel that the fish, shrimp, and crabs in the tank will be less the next day. Lost a lot. Standing behind Guchan, Zhenjun Shujianhu Jejong had mixed feelings. Not only a strong sense of loss and jealousy, but also a sense of relief. Although I definitely don't have such a great blessing, but it is a blessing to have this disciple. And this trip is definitely not in vain. The old man saw the head approaching with his own eyes, and murmured, "A wonder of the world." Chen Ping'an suddenly told the girl in black that he wanted to come into the house, and finally crouched in the corner with his back to her, and hid something in the palm of his hand. After he went out, he said that he was going to buy her a pottery pot for decoction, which was lacking at home. After the straw shoe boy walked away quickly, the girl glanced at the dark corner of the corner, where an old jar stood. In fact, the girl's hearing is very good. The thing in his palm is a broken piece of porcelain, extremely sharp. When Chen Ping'an was about to run out of the yard, the girl in black suddenly shouted, "Wait, I have something to tell you." Chen Ping'an pretended not to hear, and when he was about to open the courtyard door, the girl raised her voice. Chen Ping'an. Chen Ping'an had to turn around and run back to the threshold. Her face was a bit more rosy than before, but her voice was still a little hoarse, and said, "First, after we outsiders came to the town. Although, as I told you before, our bodies are strong, better than ordinary people. But other than that, it's no different from you. Second, outsiders are not allowed to kill people here, once violated. No matter the reason, they will be expelled, and they are destined to gain nothing. Third, you must also think clearly that when we are outsiders, in a critical moment, even if we fight with nothing, we will definitely take action. After all, it is the most fundamental thing to survive." Chen Ping'an thought for a while and asked, "Does it mean that you must do things quickly?" The black-clothed girl grinned. Her radiant face and dazzling eyes seemed to light up the whole room. She patted the green scabbard on her knees, nodded, and said, "Yes, you have to shoot quickly, faster, even the fastest. For example, I have a sword and a sword, so I will be the fastest person in the world, whether I draw a sword or draw a sword." She paused, and suddenly changed from an impassioned, distant heroine to a girl next door who wanted to show off. She squinted and asked with a smile, "Hey, do you know how many there are in this world?" Chen Ping'an looked at a loss. The girl also seemed to see that the boy was not interested, so she was immediately dull, waving her hand to chase away. "It's better to buy the jar back. I'm waiting for the medicine." This time, Chen Ping'an's pace of leaving the yard was slower and more stable. Not long after he left Mud Bottle Alley, the unlocked courtyard door was gently pushed open, and the girl in black opened her eyes. She breathed in a strange way just now and looked towards the door, like an enemy. The flying sword and the snow-white scabbard on the table was suddenly silent, but there was a chilling air invisibly, as if the current cold spring could freeze the bones and kill people. The maid, Zhigui, walked leisurely to the door, just like a normal neighbor who walks from door to door. She didn't step over the threshold, poked her head into the house, looked around, and turned a blind eye to the girl in black with the knife on her knee on the small bed. Zhigui looked at it for a long time, and finally saw the big living person, and said innocently, "This sister. Who are you? Why are you sitting on Chen Ping'an's bed? I have never heard that he has distant relatives." Ning Yao glanced at the uninvited girl, then closed her eyes and didn't care, seeing her pretending to be deaf and dumb. Zhigui wasn't angry, just shook his head slightly, pouted, and looked disgusted. She glanced at the long sword with the snow-white scabbard on the table. In the depths of her eyes, deep hatred and fear were hidden, and there were faint golden threads running wildly in her pupils. The maid hesitated for a moment, but still raised one foot, ready to cross the threshold, suddenly retracted her foot, coughed, and pretended to say, "I'm in. If you don't speak, you don't object, right? Yes, this is what it is. Chen Ping'an's house. I've known him for many years. You don't understand what I said, right? It doesn't matter. We don't have much to talk about anyway. I just came here to see if there is anything missing. We are going to move out soon, and many things can be left to Chen Ping'an. Don't you know? He has had a hard time these years, nagging and thinking. Let her and Chen Ping'an look like childhood sweethearts." After the maid Jiggy walked into the room, the weather was calm. She went straight to the small table and sat on the stool. The corner of her eye kept circling on the sword. At the same time, the black-clothed girl also took out the 3 pieces of paper left by the young Taoist to Chen Ping'an, looked at it carefully, and tried to figure out a little way. But it was a pity that she read it over and over again. But she still couldn't do it, and said disappointedly, "These words are really without taste." She clearly remembered that on the long wall in her hometown, there were 18 characters on and off, all of which were carved by someone with a sword. When she was still a child, her greatest hobby was to stand in a certain stroke of those large characters and look up. Therefore, for the small town's 4-character plaque Fighting Bull, the girl really does not look down on it. The maid Jiggy turned around, quietly straightened her slender waist, and put her hands on her knees, trying to make herself more like a lady, facing the black-clothed girl, smiling softly and saying, "Oh, girl, you were too careless." Ning Yao couldn't help but ask, "Who are you?" Zhigui groaned and touched his chest, pretending to be surprised. "Girl, you can speak our dialect." Ning Yao asked again, "Are you okay?" Zhigui pointed at the long sword on the table. "Yours." Ning Yao frowned and said nothing. The girl in black didn't speak, and Zhigui didn't care. She stood up and walked to the corner of the wall, looking at the bottles and jars on the wooden shelf. Those worthless belongings? The maid looked carefully. when he was an apprentice as a kiln worker. Chen Ping'an walked barefoot through all the mountains and rivers around the town. He went to the mountains to dig soil, chop wood, and ran up and down the mountain very quickly. As long as others are willing to teach him something, no matter if it is simple or obscure and difficult to learn, Chen Ping'an will spend minutes to do it. Just like Old Man Yao taught him the skill of burning porcelain, he was always digging, never willing to come up with the real skills of pressing the bottom of the box. But as long as Old Man Yao said and did it, Chen Ping'an would do it very seriously. Later, Liu Xianyang taught him to make wooden bows, fishing rods, etc. And Chen Ping'an also learned meticulously. Next door, Song Jixin has always been mean, saying that Chen Ping'an's habit, according to the book, is called obeying the destiny. But unfortunately, Chen Ping'an has no good luck at all. In this case, it is better to eat and wait for death. The jar was broken. Zhigi waved his hand and said with a bright smile, "Let's go, let's go. Girl, you are recovering well. If you need to, call me. My name is Zhigi, and I live in the next yard." Ning Yao was expressionless. The maid left the house, walked to the yard, and muttered in a voice that the black-clothed girl in the house could just hear, "It doesn't look good either." Ning Yao also said softly, "Intentionally or unintentionally. This name is really tacky." When Zhigi closed the courtyard door, there was some force, and there was a loud bang. Ning Yao closed again and rested. Ning Yao's heart was not disturbed by the visit of the strange girl. But she really doesn't like this town, especially the cultivators who come here to seek opportunities, intrigue, fly and Gugu, saying that she is a master of immortals, just because she is standing on the mountain, not how tall she is. In the mind of the young girl, Ning Yao, the avenue should not be so small. After the straw shoe boy walked out of the mud bottle alley, the sunlight was a little dazzling. He stretched out his right hand to cover his forehead and let out a light breath. Then he started jogging with brisk steps. Even though he had crossed the streets and alleys many times, he was still not tired. After all, for a teenager who was used to going up and down the mountains, this distance was really not worth mentioning. It was really worth mentioning. The hard thing is to go up the mountain to burn charcoal. A dragon kiln needs to use 2 caddies of charcoal every year, especially in heavy rainy days. Living on the mountain to chop wood and burn charcoal is really a kind of suffering. Inside the charcoal kiln that collapsed during construction, most of the things the teenager has done over the years are physical work, and some skills are also taught. But after getting started, it is purely based on strength to eat. So the appearance of the teenager is thin and weak. It is just an illusion of sturdy. Chen Ping'an stopped at an intersection, leaned his back against the wall, squatted down, always clenched his fist with one hand, and fastened his straw sandals with the other. At this moment, the young man's heart was like water, just a little bit missing the only friend in town. That guy once showed off to Chen Ping'an mysteriously, saying that his grandfather told a story. When his grandfather was a child, he saw someone standing by the stream, and just trotting a few steps, he jumped over the entire stream in one step. Later, Liu Xianyang and Chen Ping'an went to try on their own and picked the narrowest section of the stream. They both stepped back for a run and took off at the same time. As a result, Liu Xianyang, who was a few years older than Chen Ping'an, jumped and fell into the water with exhaustion. I found a dark shadow on top of my head. Swish it. Continue to move forward, and finally landed far away. After that, Liu Xianyang never mentioned any immortals who crossed the stream one step at a time. After that, Liu Xianyang knew that Chen Ping'an would often go to the stream by himself, running, taking off, flying, leaping, and falling. The young man was getting closer to the other side every time, never tired of it. Once, when Liu Xianyang saw the shocking scene, he couldn't help but look at it from a distance. He felt that the dark boy at that time was different from the idiot he remembered. When the boy leaps over the stream, he is like a snake eagle that often hovers in the sky of the town. Seeing that Kai Jinjian was in low spirits, Fu Nanhua took her around casually. The two walked side by side, taking it as a distraction. During the period, there were some anecdotes about the south of Dongbao Pingzhou. Kai Jinjian still forced a smile. But compared with the irritability after leaving Mud Bottle Alley is indeed much better. Her impression of this noble son of the old Dragon City is getting better and better. She must know that although the old Dragon City has a profound background and a lot of talents, it is only a line away from the top sex. It is reasonable to say that it is much higher than the second-rate Yunxia Mountain. However, the orthodox fairy family, with orderly inheritance and roots like Yunxia Mountain, has an innate sense of superiority to the southern barbarians like Lao Longcheng. Well trained, Kai Jinjian said bitterly. Brother Fu, although Yungan Stone is the lifeblood of our Yunxia Mountain, since it was agreed in advance, I will not renege on the debt, and even if I go bankrupt, I will pay back to Brother Fu. Fu Nanhua comforted. It's hard to say whether the fate of Guqian's family is a sure thing. Kai Jinjian's face was gloomy, and he shook his head and said, Zhejiang Zhenjun Liu Jimao. The statement is not fake, and the means are not weak. Otherwise, there is no way to have a place in Shujian Lake. This opportunity cannot be forced. Once Liu Jimao is offended, how can I bear it? I'm afraid that Liu Jimao will hate the power of a real person from the outside world. Once he leaves the town, without the saint sitting in charge and restrained by the rules, God knows what radical actions Liu Jimao will make. Presumably, Brother Fu is on the border, and he will also see, according to some clues, the subordinates at the mountain gate who came here to hunt for treasure with me are not strong enough, and they are not his opponent at all. Fu Nanhua smiled and said, "Don't worry, even if it's for those 10 Yungen stones. My old dragon city will escort you back to Yunxia Mountain safely." Kai Jinjin turned her head and smiled sweetly at him. Yan Shui Qutong. And her pulse was full of affection. Fu Nanhua was quite complacent, and habitually wanted to touch the jade pendant, but after touching it for a while, he remembered that his old dragon cloth yu pen had been given to the boy named Song Jixin. Kai Jinjin breathed a sigh of relief. When walking, her footsteps slanted slightly to the left, so her shoulder lightly touched Fu Nanhua. During the trip to Niping Lane, Kai Jinjin made an unplanned bet. It was a temporary idea, but she weighed it carefully. But it turned out that she lost the bet, and the price was 10 priceless cloud root stones. The trip to the small town was full of anxiety, and invisibly he developed a sense of dependence on Fu Nanhua, or a gambler's mind. 10 cloud root stones are gambling, but 50 yuan is not the same. If you win the bet, you will earn a lot of money. But if you lose the bet, Kai Jinjin feels that she will not lose. Absolutely not. She is Kai Jinjian, the one cultivation talent in Yunxia Mountain. On the road of cultivation, everything was smooth sailing, and his realm was improved like a broken bamboo. Kai Jinjian didn't believe that he would capsize in this stinky ditch. At the same time as Kai Jinjian's mood improved, Fu Nanhua, who felt that the overall situation had been set, also had a leisurely attitude to truly appreciate Kai Fairy's appearance and figure. It was undeniable that she was a naturally charming woman. Cultivation or betting, both can gradually get better. Kai Jinjin was once hailed as the wind of Yungen Mountain, the posture of flying in the sky by a senior man with high morals people, who have cultivated Kai Jinjian regardless of the cost in these years, have no selfish desire to sell at a price. The marriage of immortal families is a match made in heaven. Compared with the marriage of the wealthy family in secular dynasties, it is more cautious and far-sighted. It's just that Fu Nanhua really doesn't have a good impression of Yunxia Mountain, and placing the fate of the mountain gate on Kai Jinjian's shoulders is really outrageous. This is also the reason why Fu Nanhua has a bad impression of Yunxia Mountain. Fu Nanhua reminded, if the young man next door to Song Jixin is also selected by a certain force outside and still keeps that piece of porcelain with his real name, then you will cause trouble if you make a move this time, and you will be easily stalked to find Yunxia Mountain and you. Furthermore, master and servant Song Jixin and True Lord Zhejiang Liu Jiamao may have noticed this. Kai Jinjian smiled and said, Brother Fu may have been focusing on the clues of chance, and he didn't care about some unwritten rules here, people born in the small town. When the boy was 9 years old, if he hadn't been waited for nearly 10 years by the porcelain buyer, looking for an opportunity to take them out of the town, it means that the root bone talent is not congenital. It is not worth much. And the older you get, the cheaper it will be. Those sect gangs will spend a huge amount of adoption money to take advantage of them, obviously. It is far less beneficial than using a lot of money to cultivate a few direct descendants. When Kai Jinjian mentioned the straw shoe boy, he was full of disgust. Ordinary people should have the consciousness of ordinary people. Fu Nanhua tried his best to be careful with his words and persuaded him, that's the truth. But that young man is short-sighted. How could he know of your honor? Fairy K of Yunxia Mountain. It's an offense. And a lesson is enough. Fu Nanhua felt that Kai Jinjian's outrageous attack must be a monster if something abnormal happened. Maybe there was a hidden secret, which was related to chance, so he hoped to come up with some words to see if he could find some clues, in case the praying mantis catches the cicada and the oriole is behind. And he regards her as the autumn cicada. In fact, she is the oriole. Old Dragon City has gone through untold hardships, and given a far more exaggerated price than Zhengyang Mountain and Yunxia Mountain, only a few fragments of the truth were obtained, and Fu Nanhua was able to note that the so-called chance in the town has existed for 3,000 years. That field, after the soul-stirring and tragic war, except for those talented town children. It is true that they are just magic artifacts left by the ancestors of the predecessors. But when this blessed land is facing complete collapse, it is not so simple. Up in the last dynasty, the mountains and rivers were broken, and there must be magical weapons and weapons born to usher in the new atmosphere of the new dynasty. Kai Jinjian was a little gloomy. Don't mention him. It makes me sick just thinking about it. Immediately, there was a rare trace of hostility in her long eyes, but she didn't want to ruin her image of a fairy in Fu Nanhua's mind, so she didn't tell her what she was thinking. If she meets that young bastard outside of the small town in the future, she must let him die happily, instead of just dragging a sickly body and continuing to live for 10 or 20 years. The tall, slender woman especially hated the boy's eyes. Deep down, she had an obsession that she had never thought about. That kind of clean eyes. She has practiced for so many years in Yunxia Mountain, which is known as clean and clear. She has never seen a poor boy who grew up in a poor alley, day after day, have this beauty year after year. Kai Jinjian tilted her head and rubbed her eyelids. This action made her distant eyebrows even longer. Fu Nanhua, who has been looking at the surrounding scene, joked casually. In our old Dragon City's wells, there is a widely circulated saying that the left eye jumps for wealth and the right eye jumps for disaster. Are you left eye jump or right eye jump? Kai Jinjian quickly retracted her hand as if her fingers were hot, and glared at him. Her right eyelid was obviously twitching. Fu Nanhua, who was asking for hardship, hurriedly made up for it, and said with a smile, the blind attention of ordinary people should not be taken seriously. Kai Jinjian raised the corners of her mouth, turned sideways, stared at Fu Nanhua's profile. and said triumphantly, "Have you been deceived?" Fu Nanhua was stunned for a while, looking at Kai Jinjian, whose young daughter was charming and naive. He was a little moved for no reason. He was suddenly hesitant, and his murderous intentions for her began to waver. Wouldn't it be more conducive to the plan of the old Dragon City forces to go north? Once Kai Jinjian succeeds in getting a chance here, after returning to the mountain gate, her status will inevitably rise, and she will operate properly. It is not even possible that she has no chance to become the mistress of Yunxia Mountain, in the ancestral genealogy of Yunxia Mountain with a long history. It is not without precedent that women are in charge of the family. In this way, the old Dragon City is equivalent to having a springboard, and it is justifiable to penetrate the hinterland of the East Treasure Pingzhou. However, the embarrassing situation of separatism can only be favored, and it has suffered from rejection for hundreds of years. Not far ahead, a few steps away, is the intersection of two alleys, horizontal and vertical. When Fu Nanhua saw the fork, he suddenly woke up, as if he had realized something, and his eyes became firm again. Fu Nanhua, who was wearing a high crown, instantly seeped fine beads of sweat on his forehead. Those who mess with my will be killed. With a firm mind. At this moment, Fu Nanhua looked at Kai Jinjian again. His eyes, air and mood returned to the free and easy before. It was purely as if he was appreciating a picture. The beauty in beauty can be seductive, and now he can only look a few more times. After all, after she left the town, she was destined to disappear in his hands, murder and set fire to gold belts, build roads and bridges without bones. Listen, some famous sayings and aphorisms from the bottom of the market are really universal. Fu Nanhua's mind was suddenly enlightened. Kai Jinjian turned sideways with a soft voice and asked with a smile, "Nanhua, what did you think of So Happy?" She quietly changed her name to a more intimate name. Fu Nanhua shook his head and smiled. Just as he was about to speak, he saw a dark shadow out of the corner of his eyes. A thin young man, as if he only took one step, stepped from the horizontal alley to Kai Jinjian. His left hand swiftly lifted up, and at the same time, his right fist had already hit Fairy Yunxia Mountain's abdomen with a heavy force. The sudden force between the dimensions, there was a faint whistling sound, forcing the woman to bend down and bow her head. Although the strength of the boy's right hand has far surpassed that of his peers, the boy is actually left-handed. So the sharp weapon held by the boy's left hand completely fell into Kai Jinjian's throat and pierced directly through his lower mouth. The young man didn't give up. His right hand punched the woman's chest, and his left hand was still lifted upwards, guaranteed that this sneak attack will not have the slightest accident. At that moment, blood spurted from the woman's slender and fair neck. Next, the teenager exerted force on his waist and ankles, rammed the tall, slender woman's heart with his shoulders, and slammed her whole body into the horizontal alley. Fu Nanhua's feet were rooted on the ground, and he stood still. This old young master of Longsheng has a blank mind. Fu Nanhua regained his senses and looked around, not even letting go of the roof of the alley. He didn't notice anything unusual. He took a deep breath and neither stepped forward nor retreated. He subconsciously grabbed the ancestral jade pendant again. After failing, he quickly recited a fragmented, biamented, and broken Taoist formula. This formula is not a magical power, but it is to help him calm down. If the state of mind is like a boat on a lake, then this formula starts. The roll is the anchor. He began to turn his back to a wall and walked sideways to the fork of the two alleys. His muscles were tense, and he took a defensive posture. He didn't dare to take it lightly. The boy in straw sandals stood beside Kai Jinjian's body lying in a pool of blood. The boy bowed slightly, maintaining a subtle offensive posture, and also stared at him. Fu Nanhua, each is different. The boy who was born in the sky should have only Kai Jinjian's goal regarding the appearance of Fu Nanhua. The posture that the boy in the mean alley showed by instinct is more of a meaning that you don't commit me. I don't commit crimes. Fu Nanhua asked a redundant question. You killed her. The young man was silent, always holding the murder weapon in his hand. It was a broken piece of porcelain, slightly smaller than the palm of his hand, and the part that exposed his fist was extremely sharp. As a result, drips fell on the alley ground. After Fu Nanhua made sure that there were no other people around, he felt both absurd and relieved. In the end, he cast his eyes on Kai Jinjian's delicate body. Even in such a depressing scene, it still did not damage her natural beauty. She was graceful and graceful, her plump breasts undulating slightly, and scarlet blood continued to pour out of her neck and mouth, and her vitality was about to be completely cut off. But the strong physique that has been tempered repeatedly by the Qi machine will make the pain she endures heavier and longer than ordinary people. Fu Nanhua had a little smile on his face, but with a grim chill in his bones. He asked, "Why did you kill her? You and this sister have no grievances or enmity. Is it because she made a joke with you in Mud Bottle Alley? You're going to kill people. When did the town become so lawless? Do you know that killing people to pay for their lives and debts is the same everywhere?" The young man is like a mute, silent. Fu Nanhua didn't care what the young man was thinking and started to move forward slowly and firmly. He knew that Kai Jinjian was dead. This was not Yunxia Mountain, the immortal cave dwelling, but the heavenly Tao cage where magic was forbidden, unless there was a terrestrial immortal who could reach the sky, or a golden-bodied arhat who was willing to take most of his cultivation in exchange for her life. It is possible to suppress her soul and help her bring her back to life. It is a pity that Kai Jinjun will never have such a blessing. On the way of cultivation, they died inexplicably on Yangguan Avenue, or died on a single plank bridge fighting for a first-line opportunity. Although it is not too many, it is definitely not uncommon. If you can prove the Tao and live forever, you can step by step take every step for the camp, without disaster, and enjoy the benefits without taking risks, then the worry-free immortals in the eyes of the common people seem to be too worthless. Therefore, Fu Nanhua even prepared for the worst of his life for his trip to the small town. But in the small town, under the eyes of a saint, he saw his temporary allies walking side by side, being slaughtered with lightning speed. The young city lord of the old dragon city is the first time in history there is no dazzling magic weapon counterattack. There is no earth-shattering fairy tale handwriting just to kill a lowly rural mudleg. Already, Fu Nanhua was shocked and could not accept this absurd fact. If it weren't for this small town, the straw shoe boy with a life as cheap as weeds, even if he saw Kaijinjian's side and Yunxia Mountain from a distance, it would be a far-fetched extravagant hope. Fu Nanhua's face was solemn, and he said solemnly, "Although I can't save Fairy Kay in time, I can't kill you and avenge Kai Fairy. But since I saw your murder with my own eyes, if I don't do anything, once it spreads out, the old dragon cities, the golden signboard is about to be smashed. Therefore, I should teach you a lesson if you are affectionate and reasonable. As for how to deal with it on Yunxia Mountain and how to give Fairy Kai justice, that is your business." The high-sounding words of the young master of the old dragon city are meant for the sage of this side, and they are polite words, so as not to look too ugly and arouse the sage's bad feelings in the future. There is also a possibility that it was told to the old ancestors of Yunxia Mountain. Fu Nanhua is nothing more than asking for a person who puts on the table. Otherwise, Fu Nanhua, who already had the idea of killing Kai Jinjian, really wanted to reward the young man in front of him. As Fu Nanhua walked forward, he said, "Seeing your method of killing just now, it means that the instant explosive power of your stinky skin is not smaller than that of ordinary young and strong men. This is actually quite rare. If there is no such incident today, as long as you have the opportunity to join the army, dare to fight, and some chance coincidence, you will be favored by a certain military leader or a military general from a family on the battlefield, and I will give you a military formula for casting your body. After 30 years, you kid may not have a new world." When Fu Nanhua was walking forward, the young man began to back away slowly, facing the old man with a high crown and big sleeves, young master of Dragon City. The slender Fu Nanhua was walking in the alley, with the jade trees facing the wind. With a natural richness and grace, Fu Nanhua stretched out a hand, palm down, hanging on his waist, and said with a smile, "It's a pity your life is not very good. Otherwise, according to what I said, you will have a chance to achieve such a high achievement. It's impossible." Fu Nanhua was amused by his own joke, and his smile became even stronger. When he took a step forward, his foot suddenly hung in the air, half a foot above the ground. I'm sorry, it's so high. It was hard for Fu Nanhua not to be happy. After entering the town, he first made a deal with Song Jixin, a boy from Mud Bottle Alley, and the profits were huge, far exceeding expectation. Then Kai Jinjin, who was most likely obstructed by her own way, died suddenly in front of her eyes. Not only could she keep her hands clean and bloodless, but she could also get 2 bags of gold and copper coins on her body for nothing, and maybe even 1 or 2 pieces of Yunxia Mountain could be found, even if it is not the treasure of Zhenshan. It is definitely not far behind. He does not believe that Kai Jinjian has no amulet by his side. For example, in his Fu Nanhua, in addition to the old dragon cloth rain pendant, which was just a trick, he also carried 2 small things of excellent quality and high quality, which were almost considered treasures at the bottom of the old dragon city. Therefore, among the cultivators of Yaluzi, who are on the sidelines, there is a well-known mantra: collect corpses for others, and there will be good rewards. When Fu Nanhua passed by Kai Jinjian's body, he didn't even look at her. On the contrary, the faint bloody smell made him in an inexplicable state of excitement. 1 step forward and 1 step back. The 2 were always more than 10 steps apart. Fu Nanhua only needs to make sure that the boy can't run out of the alley. At that time, if he wants to catch a boy who was born and bred here, it will be tantamount to finding a needle in a haystack. What's more, the warm beauty's body behind him is a lesson from the past. Once the teenager is given enough breathing room, the surprise may fall on his own head. Fu Nanhua seemed to be chasing mice, but he was actually adjusting his body rhythm. After all, he had never had the chance to rely solely on melee combat to decide the outcome after he officially set foot in the practice at the age of 9. Of course, he doesn't have to share life and death with the young man. That would make him more than worth the loss. Together with Kai Jinjian, they are 2 easy opportunities. But he must let this unexpected young man lie on the bed in the near future, and not give the young man a little bit of possibility. Fu Nanhua suddenly smiled and asked, "By the way, what's your name?" The boy, who was full of blood and blood, kept answering non-stop questions. His dark face was full of tenacity like a native weed. "You and she may not know. My eyesight is very good. So in the Mud Bottle Alley, she chatted with me. When you look at her, the way you look at her is exactly the same as when you look at me now." Fu Nanhua was stunned for a while, but this time he really looked at the young man with admiration. He tick-tick smiled and said, "It's interesting. It's really interesting." Fu Nanhua's words indeed seemed to be light, but in fact, he had been paying attention to the boy's left hand, and he was still bleeding. This shows that the young man's hand strength has not slackened, and ordinary people may have long been unable to overcome the bone-piercing pain. It was only at this time that Fu Nanhua felt that the casual comment of "it's a pity" turned out to be true. Fu Nanhua felt that the time was almost up, and asked the last question of interest. "You killed her so decisively? Someone must have tipped you off. But I'm not curious about his identity. What I can't figure out is that you, a child who grew up here, how could he cross the hurdle in his heart so quickly and kill so much? Peace of mind. Do you understand this statement? You know, even if it was me, after the first murder, I waited until that point. When the excitement faded away, the whole person began to tremble, and it took me a long time to recite the meditation art to feel better, which is not like you, calm and calm, like eating and drinking. This is unreasonable." The boy, who had always been expressionless, suddenly showed horrified eyes and a panicked expression. His eyes looked straight behind Fu Nanhua, as if the dead, tall, slender woman had come back to life. The cautious Fu Nanhua turned his head subconsciously, and when his neck turned halfway, his heart trembled. When he turned back to the past, due to the disparity in height, Fu Nanhua had been straight ahead and had a low line of sight, but there was no trace of the boy. In the nick of time, original, after making that look and expression, in an instant, the straw shoe boy started sprinting without hesitation. After 3 steps, his left foot suddenly exerted force, and the whole person jumped high, and finally stepped on the side of the alley with his right foot on the wall. After the rapid ejection and turning, the young man raised his left hand high towards the man with a high crown. The boy is really like a snake eagle in a cottage that does not hang a plaque. The middle-aged Confucian scholar Qi Jingchun is sitting and playing music. He was about to drop a white piece on the chessboard and sighed. The place where the chess piece that had been fixed long ago took root. The scholar suddenly began to hesitate about the chess piece. After he retracted his hand, the chess piece was still hovering in the air, still more than an inch from the chessboard. Qi Jingchun is still sitting upright. As the contemporary saint in charge of this place, one of the 72 academies of Confucianism, and the former owner of the Shanya Academy, even if he is relegated to this place to commit crimes and meritorious deeds, Qi Jingchun is still a well-deserved Confucian in the world. For ordinary people in the town, the vegetation withered and flourished every year, and the spring and autumn of Jiazi were fleeting. The teacher has changed several times, with different appearances and different ages. Only the temperament of the scholar who can't tell the truth is the same. Old-fashioned, harsh, taciturn. In short, very boring, and no one thought that the few village school teachers who came and went were actually the same person. Not only that, in the vast world outside the town, Mr. Qi, who lived in seclusion, once possessing a transcendent and lofty status. He also possesses the supreme supernatural power of righteousness. The next moment, Qi Jingchun's primordial spirit traveled far and wide, like an immortal in a snow-white robe fluttering, breaking free from the shackles of the cage in an instant, and floated to an alley in the town. Qi Jingchun came to the alley in an instant. He first went to see the woman lying in a pool of blood, Kai Jinjian in Yungxia Mountain. After Qi Jingchun stayed for a while, he finally came to the two of them. The old Dragon City young city lord with a tall crown and had big sleeves leaned back a little and was stunned. On his handsome face with jade-like skin, his expression was complicated, intertwined with shock, doubt, and despair. The teenager maintained the fierce posture of leaping high and slaughtering forward, holding a piece of porcelain sharp as a blade in his left hand. Even at this critical moment between your life and my death, the teenager whose body was in the air still had firm eyes and a face, calm. Not like an ignorant teenager who was born in a small alley and grew up in the mountains. Probably the only thing left that fits the identity of a teenager is the helplessness hidden in the depths of his eyes. For this kind of helplessness, scholars who have walked out of the study and academy for many years are no strangers. It is like watching a peasant who depends on the sky for food, squatting on a barren ridge in the dry season, looking up at the scorching sun. In fact, there will be no tearing, heartbreaking emotion, but only deep helplessness and daze. As the temporary owner of Yitiandi, Qi Jingchun certainly knows the ins and outs of Chen Ping'an's family of 3, and even going back 100,000 years. Even if he has not seen the ancestors of the young man with his own eyes, he can roughly deduce and evolve. The reason is very simple. Just like the county magistrate of the county government, if he really wants to see the inheritance of the people under his rule, he only needs to go to the household in charge of the household registration, check the files, and see it at a glance. After more than years of reproduction and development in the town, the branches and leaves spread outside the town, and the roots are intertwined, because each generation has several amazing and brilliant characters, although they cannot return home. They can feed the family back through secret channels. It has created the most prosperous 4 surnames and 10 ethnic groups in the town today. Chen Ping'an's family has an equally long history. Their ancestors also flourished, and they were very rich. However, after 2 ups and downs, the East Treasure Pingzhou, where there are countless vassal states and dynasties like forests, gradually fell into silence and decayed. Located in other surnames, since the millennium, the river has been declining. And when it comes to the generation of the young father, the small town of the Chen family has almost completely declined in the entire East Treasure Pingzhou, not to mention the territory of the Dali dynasty where the town is located. It seems that they are officials who have been ordered by the king to not serve for generations, and there is no possibility for the family to rise again. After Qi Jingchun came here to preside over the operation of the Grand Formation for more than years, he has adhered to the four-character teacher's motto of Fangjing and peace, and will never change the fate of the people of the town without authorization based on personal likes and dislikes. Otherwise, in the eyes of this scholar who also hated evil, there is too much filth in the big houses in the small town, and there is too much poverty in the small alleys. Small households also have their wickedness. Over time, Qi Jingchun is like a goddess aloof, neither enjoying the incense nor accepting human affection, but just sitting with folded arms and ignoring world affairs. Qi Jingchun was slightly surprised, stepped forward, looked intently, and nodded lightly. The impoverished boy who was like a rainbow seemed to be ready for this culling, and he would never give up until he killed Fu Nanhua. In the end, the young man just slapped Fu Nanhua's neck heavily with his wrist, which was much better than Kai Jinjian's fate. Fu Nanhua should have been hit so hard that he fell horizontally to the wall, and then the young man grabbed his neck with one hand and pressed a porcelain piece against his abdomen with the other. Qi Jingchun was a little curious as to why the young man didn't kill the killer this time. It was a great opportunity, and it was fleeting and troubled later. Qi Jingchun is a mellow scholar who abides by etiquette, but does not stick to dogma. He is really familiar with Fu Nanhua and others, no matter their aptitude or temperament. Even in today's alley, he is threatened by a young man to temporarily give up revenge, but this matter will definitely be a great shame and humiliation that young people have only seen in their lives. It's no exaggeration to be stunned when Daoxin is on the line. At that time, it's not Fu Nanhua himself, but the old Dragon City, the master of the entire South China Sea. The reason why Qi Jingchun came here to obstruct the young man from serial killing is selfish, but also for fairness. Nowadays, the town is like a piece of cracked porcelain, which will burst and explode sooner or later. Qi Jingchun must delay this overwhelming process and try to arrange a retreat for as many people as possible. Master Ruin, who survived the last Jiazi time, was able to reluctantly be happy. People on the mountain had opportunity, and people below the mountain were stable. You must know that the vast majority of the former are consistent, when longevity is expected. What is the life and death of hundreds of thousands of ants? The heavenly family of the secular dynasty is ruthless, compared to the selflessness of the Tao that many monks respect. It is really not worth mentioning. Qi Jingchun thought for a moment and quietly disappeared. The world runs smoothly and without hindrance, and then XP before the end, quietly broken. The teenager's wrist finally hit Fu Nanhua's neck heavily. The latter's head swayed, and he fell horizontally to the wall of the alley. He was smashed to pieces by the huge force. After landing, the teenager quickly approached and hit him with an elbow, boom in Fu Nanhua's abdomen. Fu Nanhua didn't stand up straight with his back against the wall. The boy's elbow hit him almost to the point of spitting out bitter water, and his body bent instinctively. The young man grabbed Fu Nanhua's neck with one hand and pressed the porcelain piece against the belly of his young master Gao Guan. It was hard for Fu Nanhua to imagine why the emaciated youth who was a head shorter than himself had such great strength with his 5 fingers, especially the sharpness and coldness of the tiles in his abdomen, which made the old Dragon City and young city master feel the approach of death again, apart. Of course, Fu Nanhua didn't know that a child who had to go all over the mountains to find herbs when he was young because of a certain obsession that was stronger than his own survival. The boundless potential that burst out was astonishing. When the young man ate the herbal medicine and was in the alley and rolled on the ground with colic pain, that kind of obsession even made a child who should have been studying in the village school. Even if he thought about it, he would crawl back home to put that bamboo basket life-saving herbs home. After that, chopping wood and burning charcoal, burning porcelain and pulling blanks, digging mud and tasting soil, etc. There is nothing that does not need to test the youth's physical strength and endurance. Outside the small town, Fu Nanhua could arbitrarily crush 100 or 1,000 teenagers by using a little fairy magic. But choosing to live and die with him in the small town is really good luck at the end. Kicking to the iron plate, Fu Nanhua was hit by the severe pain and shame, and he was dazed, and said with a grim expression, "If you kill me, you will die. If you don't kill me, you still have to die. Little bastard, after all, you are doomed." Qin Pingan raised his head slightly, stared at the man with a mad face, and said, "You know, I don't want to kill you. I have no grievances with you, but you want to hurt me. I will fight back." Fu Nanhua grinned and said, "You little bastard, are you also worthy of reasoning with me?" Fu Nanhua. He tried his best to increase his tone. "Are you worthy?" Qin Pingan was silent for a moment and asked, "Do you have to kill me?" When Fu Nanhua saw the dark boy's eyes, he suddenly calmed down. Fu Nanhua, who was strangled by the neck, blushed, and soon turned blue and then purple. In fact, the strength of the young man's 5 fingers did not increase, but it was enough to suffocate a young man to death. Fu Nanhua said with difficulty, "I said I won't kill you. Do you believe it?" He struggled violently, but the young man increased his strength almost at the same time, causing Fu Nanhua's 5-fingered arm to sag down. Qin Pingan shook his head. Fu Nanhua became more and more dizzy. Although he wanted to slap this bastard's head with a slap in his heart, he still tried his best to be pleasant on the surface, and added, "What if I swear to God? People like us can't swear casually." Fu Nanhua played a scheming. The Buddhist school made a big vow, and swore an oath in his heart, which was indeed very binding. But it was obvious that Fu Nanhua only told half of the truth, even if he swore. He would only swear on his lips, not the solemn vow of no words, but it is tantamount to engraving on the heart wall of the Dan room. So whether to abide by it afterwards depends only on the mood. Furthermore, the oath of a practitioner's heart is not without a cracking method, and the price is just a matter of size. Generally speaking, the size of the price has an absolute relationship with the level of the monk's realm and the severity of the content of the oath. Unexpectedly, the boy with straw sandals still shook his head. Fu Nanhua, who was getting more and more difficult to breathe, had lost the spirit of bargaining and was in a trance for no reason. Are you going to die? Just like that poor bastard Cai Jinjin? Or died at the hands of a little bastard? So when this bad news is passed back to the old dragon city, will it become a joke in the whole city? He didn't even have a chance to reach out to trigger the hidden mechanism of the jade belt around his waist. The white jade belt tied around his waist was actually the remnant soul of an earth dragon. Okay. A voice from the sky sounded in the ears of the two of them. For Fu Nanhua, it was the sound of heaven, but he just passed out. Not sure if it was his hallucination. Chen Ping'an turned his head in surprise. As a result, I saw a bright and ethereal Mr. Qi. The latter smiled and said nothing. Chen Ping'an's eyes returned to tenacity, and the 5 fingers of his right hand never loosened. Qi Jingchun didn't feel annoyed at being treated as a donkey's liver and lungs with good intentions, nor did he feel relieved as if he saw something that could be made. He just waved his sleeves gently towards the straw shoe boy, as if he had fished an item into his hands. The Confucian sage spread out his palms and smiled dumbly. A cloud of filth like ink. It turned out that the intention that someone planted on the young man was bleak, and it was clear that it had long since died. Looking up at the young Chen Ping'an again, Qi Jingchun felt a little regretful and said with emotion, "No wonder Mr. said that for those who succeed in this world, extraordinary talents are second, and perseverance is the first. One lesson? It's a pity that I, Qi Jingchun, have no chance to collect closed disciples now."